Good morning, everybody. Wow, do we have a gigantic week ahead of us? We actually have a gigantic, all of April. We're about to start April this week. All of April is really, really insane. May is really, really insane. And things don't really slow down until June. And it's really this week where you see that shift of everything that we've been dealing with since pretty much November when Venus entered Capricorn and the whole Venus retrograde and the whole Mercury retrograde and the whole Mars Venus stuff. That's finally wrapping up this week. And we finally get to move on to a new chapter is maybe a good word. Maybe not a good word. New chapter. We'll see. Anyway, let's go ahead and just start talking about this week. Some of the highlights that we have going on is going to be Venus conjoining Saturn. I've really been sitting on this and I'm actually really looking forward to this. I think this is a really needed thing. We're going to talk about that. Of course, that's happening on Monday. We also have Venus squaring the nodes. That's a really big deal. Saturn's also going to be squaring the nodes next week. A lot of planets are going to be squaring the nodes. A lot of things are going to be pivoting this week and really shifting the momentum, going from that south node, drain energy, to the north node, hey, this is where we want to go energy. Then we also have the new moon in Aries. All the fire signs, what's up? We're waiting for this one. We need to warm up after that very cold winter. And then we have the Mercury Cazimi by the end of the week. And, what's really interesting is I talk a lot about lunar transits throughout the week. And, when there's not a lot of big transits going on, those lunar transits affect you more. What's really interesting about this week is the lunar transits are kind of minimal this week. There's a few days where really not a lot is going on, especially when the moon goes through Pisces. And this week just really offers a lot of time to, I think, really sit with what has gone on since really Venus is retrograded and really confronting a lot of what has happened, what is happening, and what's going to happen, and then really moving into that. Let's go ahead and start talking. Well, let me actually talk about Monday. Monday, the moon is going to conjoin Venus and Saturn while Venus is conjoining Saturn. Now, we ended last week's horoscope with Sunday, the moon ingressing into Aquarius, and it was going to conjoin Mars in Aquarius, and then it was going to conjoin Venus in Aquarius, right? So this is what it's looking like. Quite a bit of things going on here in Aquarius. There is a hardcore negative side, of course, to Mars and Saturn being in Aquarius. That's something that we're going to talk about mostly next week. But I think as the moon and Venus are hitting Saturn, waking up on Monday morning, it's been a long time coming. Let's think about how long Venus, the planet of value and fun and enjoyment and pleasure, she has been in a Saturn-ruled sign. She's been in Capricorn. I believe Venus entered Capricorn at the beginning of November of 2021. November? That was all of November, all of December, all of January, all of February, and pretty much all of March, she'll be in a Saturn. So Venus has been in the signs that rule darkness and coldness and, rules and structures and, boundaries and not being able to, in restrictions, right? So Venus hasn't had a lot of really fun times, a lot of fun energy. Don't get me wrong. Of course, Venus, likes the air signs and the earth signs. It's a little bit more in her domain, but she was also conjoining Pluto. And then there was a whole Mercury retrograde on top of Venus. And then she's been harassed by Mars for the past couple of weeks and been on top of Mars this whole time. So, it's just, so think about this in your personal life, right? What was that Venus retrograde for you? Well, it was in Capricorn, right? There was that huge value shift. And then Mars came into the picture. And that was really the real challenge, right? It was an added layer of, intense energy, Mars's, fights, conflicts, this building up to something, right? And then everything went into Aquarius and everything kind of shifted, right? You were onto kind of a new chapter. And Mars has been kind of egging on Venus here in Aquarius, where, again, Aquarius is, I've talked about it before, there's the air sign aspect of, thoughts, rationale, thinking, and communication. But it's, Aquarius, so it has much more to do with bigger groups of people and societies and abstract ideas. It's much more important, of course, knowing where Mars and Venus is currently transiting in your chart. But as it's been through Aquarius, there's been this kind of being on the fringe, doing things on the outside, or doing things collectively, I think is maybe even a more appropriate word. And as Venus hits Saturn, there is this addressing an authority here. Venus is, what our wants are and our values and what we enjoy, what we want, right? We've been all following this, war stuff, right? And I'm sure you guys have seen a lot of astrologers talk about the Mars and Venus being like, Mars is war, Venus is like, the bounty of war, or the goods of it. But Venus is like conjoining Saturn with the moon, right? There is this sense of like, this is what I want. Venus is connection, right? Venus is bringing things together. Venus is peace and harmony. And I think as Venus is conjoining Saturn, there is this coming together. There is this cohesion. Venus is like glue. And I think with the moon being on top of here, the moon really brings out this empathetic part of it, where the moon, Venus, Saturn is like, hey, what is really important here? What do we need to protect? What do we need? Where do we need to kind of come together? And I look at this as, I think in a personal transit, because Venus has just been in Earth in these Saturn ruled signs for so long. So when we talk about, enjoyment and fun and love, and we've been taking it so seriously, we've been looking at these areas of our life so seriously. And I think as Venus kind of hits Saturn, there is this, I don't even want to say, it doesn't seem like a bottom to me. It seems much more of like, maybe Venus was retrograding in Capricorn and there was this value shift in, rules or boundaries, or, how you implement your plans, or Venus in Capricorn, right? Like the systems and structures in which you kind of relate to. And I think as Venus was in Aquarius, there was this kind of, how do you keep things fixed? What is the right idea that's going to work? But I think as Venus has kind of built up this conjunction to Saturn, this is kind of like understanding what that new value shift is, right? This is kind of like being able to say, you know what, this is what I want. This is what's going to work for me. Saturn is, again, like structures, rules. It is authority. So Venus conjoining Saturn is kind of like, Venus addressing an authority, addressing a superior. But the moon's here, right? There is this empathetic sense of like, hey, I'm trying to relate to you. Let's actually connect here. So I don't necessarily see this as bad, but I see this as, Venus is being smashed between Mars and Saturn this whole time. And I think as Venus hits Saturn, there is this, this is also happening in the face of the moon. The moon rules the third face of Aquarius. And, I think there is this kind of like appeal to, a wider sense of what's important, especially to Aquarius, has to do with communities, people, how the structures in which we can all relate to each other and how society operates on. And I just kind of look at this in a personal way. There is this kind of, I think social cohesion is a good way to look at it. This things coming together, things making sense, right? And as Venus conjoin, the thing is, as Venus conjoins Saturn, Venus is then going to leave, for the most part, any hardcore transits to her, right? So Venus will conjoin Saturn a little bit later on Monday. And then as Venus separates from Saturn, she's pretty much in the clear, right? She had to go through this whole retrograde in Saturn's first house. Then she had to go through Aquarius with Mars. And then there's this final, like, addressing like the realities, addressing like the truth, addressing like, what is really important, right? Like Venus is, I've been really thinking about this with like Venus is like, again, like what we want, but Saturn is like literally like what's realistic. Saturn is like what is, you know what I mean? And I think there's this coming together with our wants and also what is realistic, what is actually like not, super ideal, but what can actually happen, what actually can come together. It looks really exciting to me. And I think as Venus leaves this conjunction with Saturn, she's no longer having this application to Mars. She's also separating from Saturn. So technically, Mars and Venus have been separating for quite some time, but now like Mars and Saturn are doing their own thing, which is its own other problem. But I think as Venus leaves this conjunction with Saturn, there is this sense of freedom. Like you addressed the thing, and Saturn Aquarius is like that judge, right? Of like, are you guilty or are you not guilty? Innocent, not innocent. And I think as Venus leaves that conjunction with Saturn, there's this kind of like, even I think when you address something, no matter if that outcome is good or bad, the sense of addressing it is in that sense of letting go of that and that sense of the freedom afterwards. I think the freedom of knowing, right? I think that is really important. And I think that's what a lot of Venus is kind of going to go through as we go into Monday night. There's this like, okay, we faced it, we addressed it. Venus will have this kind of 5 minutes where she's at the end of Aquarius and not really doing too much before she enters Pisces. So it's kind of like, let's say you're on this court case and the judge is like, oh, well, like some of the evidence is all fucked up, so we can't do anything, dismissed. And maybe there's like a 5 or 10 minute zone where you can't really react yet or anything, and you kind of have just to wait till you get outside. That's kind of what Venus is going to be going through until she enters Pisces. There's a sense of like, okay, we just addressed that. Time to like, before I can react, let me just get my shit together. But I think there's going to be the sense of freedom, just not being restrained between this, Mars of like, here's what, the conflict, the arguing, the strife, and here's Saturn, the authorities, the boundaries, the entrapment. And as Venus kind of hits that Saturn thing of kind of just faces it, there is this moving on. And I think, it's really melancholy in a weird way, but this looks really exciting because also too, now Venus is heading towards this conjunction with Jupiter. And from here on out, things are really going to ramp up in a very positive way. Don't get me wrong, we still have the Mars-Saturn conjunction to go through, which is going to be hardcore, but this is quite a big shift. I really can't emphasize this enough. Let's actually go ahead and start talking about Tuesday, because Tuesday is super weird. I'm a big Seinfeld person. This Tuesday has a feeling, that's for sure. The biggest thing is the moon, of course, is just going to ingress into Pisces later on Tuesday, earlier on Tuesday morning. And that's kind of it. Excuse me. So let me show you. The moon will, of course, conjoin Venus, and then the moon will kind of be void, so it'll be kind of weird for a second. And then early on Tuesday morning, the moon ingresses into Pisces. And look, the moon, when we kind of go through the day, the moon is not doing anything. And I really like this because, look, all of this stuff in Venus is now separated from Saturn. Yes, Mars and Saturn are coming together, we're going to talk about that, which is very hardcore. But I think Venus is being separated, right? The moon is not aspecting any of this. Mercury and the sun aren't aspecting any of this. Uranus is out of the picture by now. There's this weird in-between worlds at this moment where the Aquarius stuff is like, there was a buildup and then it, died down, and now we're waiting for the Mars-Saturn. And then the moon is kind of pretty much just hanging out in Pisces. It will sextile Uranus, but like not even until later on in the night. And honestly, who cares? Because the moon's really just not going to be doing anything while it's in this first like 10 degrees of Pisces. So I've been thinking about this of like, it just seems like once Venus hits Saturn and then leaves, and then the moon goes into Pisces, it's kind of like, when you have to go through something so fucking serious, like that you don't even like, have you ever, I don't know, even know, like this is kind of hard to express. Like, have you ever been through something, an event in your life where it wasn't until it was over where you really checked in and realized how much you just went through, and like your body reacted, like, especially too, it was like, if you've been fighting something or if you've been doing something and it's like, finally, you get a space to relax and you kind of like melt a little bit. Like a lot of this moon in Pisces seems like melting, in my opinion. There is this whole day on Tuesday where the moon is just going to be in Pisces, not really aspecting anything. It's building up towards a sextile with Uranus and eventually a conjunction with Jupiter and Neptune. But now that Venus is off of Saturn, there's this kind of like one part of you is melting away. And then I think the other part is this Mars-Saturn conjunction. I mean, what's interesting about Tuesday is, we're done with the Venus stuff. There's this weird period where Venus is going to be, of course, in Aquarius until she leaves and goes into Pisces, but we're still building up for the Mars-Saturn conjunction. We're still building up for the new moon in Aries, and we're still building up for the Mercury Cazimi. But at this point, we're getting towards that dark moon phase. The moon's going to be going into Pisces, and there's this kind of like, typically a full moon I would think is climax, but I look at this Mars-Saturn conjunction being much more of a climax. And this is that moment. Also, I know that just flashed, and I know that's going to bug a lot of you guys. I don't know how to fix that. I was just thinking about that. You're just going to have to deal with it. Anyway, this is kind of like before, if you're watching a movie before things kind of like pop off, there's like that weird calmness before the storm. Like this is pretty much the calm before the storm. That's exactly what I would say. And so I think this is a really good time to, I mean, what's nice about the Pisces stuff right now is that it's not aspecting any of this Aquarius stuff or this Aries stuff. And when we really think about Pisces, it's kind of like this full culmination of everything, right? You know, when you go through two winter, like, you know, by the time you get to March, by the time you get to spring or that transition from Pisces season into Aries season, you'd already gone through the worst of the winter. And there is a sense of, you know, things are coming, you know, things are on their way, you know, spring is coming up, but it's all about finding peace in that moment. Like, I think of like mindfulness. I think of meditation in Pisces. I think of like really being in that moment. And this moon in Pisces moment of Tuesday just feels like really it's going to be, I think if you're trying to not be in that moment, it will be really difficult because you're going to be kind of forced to be in that moment. But there is this is a lot of like, you guys, all of April and all of May has so much change in it. And it really plants the seeds for the next like 4 years. This is a lot of breakthrough energy in a lot of ways. This is a lot of shifting things. And yeah, literally a lot of what happens in April and May literally plants the seeds for what happens over this next 4 or 5 years. So keep that in mind. Tuesday's weird. Tuesday, and then of course we'll have the moon pretty much not even make that sextile to Uranus till way later. And like, cool, the moon in Pisces sextiling Uranus and Taurus. There is this, I think fun and excitement in doing random destabilizing events. Uranus and Taurus, when you're kind of inventive or, find ways to, when it comes to Taurus, talking about like security and value, right? And Uranus is going to be like, this freedom, this jolt. And I think moon in Pisces is like happy accidents along those lines. So we get into Wednesday though. And then on Wednesday, Venus squares the nodes while the moon conjoins Jupiter and Neptune. So here's the thing with the nodes. So the nodes are fun because, there's a lot of layers of astrology that don't necessarily, like, some parts of astrology make sense to me and other parts of astrology don't make. Like, for example, like it makes sense to me that like a planet and its movement in the sky could affect me physically, right? That is an idea that makes sense to me. I think a crazy concept to me about astrology is like the idea that zodiac signs have a particular like energy to them. And a certain planet can express itself certainly depending on the backdrop that it's in. That to me is kind of a wild part of astrology. And I think another wild part of astrology to me, as far as like schools of thought you kind of have to subscribe to, is like the nodes. The fact that, the nodes represent where the eclipses would be. The north node's going to show you, which this is, by the way, something I go over in my course that's going to be launching in a few weeks. Make sure you pay attention to that. Also on my Patreon, they're going to be getting the course early release. Also on my Patreon, I have a bunch of early release videos, ad-free videos, plus monthly horoscopes and a bunch of other stuff. Make sure you check it out. But the north node has to deal with the eclipse that is on the northern part of the ecliptic. And then the south node has to deal with the lower part of the ecliptic. And for whatever fucking reason, these little invisible parts of the sky that matter are so sensitive. They're so sensitive. They're like little portals is a good way to look at it. And when you have a planet in between the two, you just had everything go over the south node, right? Remember back in early December, we had that Mercury Cazimi on the south node. This is when Venus is building up for that retrograde. Venus is hitting the square. Venus is pivoting. Venus is going towards this north node. Venus is moving upwards. Venus is now breaking the plane. If the ecliptic is this 23-degree space in the sky, Venus is now moving on towards the ascendant part of it. And she's eventually going to meet the north node in her home sign with Uranus. So there is this truly like things elevating at this point, things shifting, things pivoting, but on a upward level. And I think that's interesting to see that this is happening once Venus leaves the conjunction with Saturn. And then, of course, here next week, I believe, Mars and Saturn will be conjoining each other, exactly squaring the node. So that will also be a very big pivot as well. But as Venus squares the nodes, I think this is a value shift, right? Venus retrograding was like us being like, this is, what we want. And then we kind of had to do, the process of changing that, like, or, it takes time for fucking shit. Nothing's overnight. That's one of the things I love about astrology is like you can really watch how a progression in your life plays out and the timeline that it goes over. But I think as we had that value shift and Venus built up, it hit Saturn, there's this like final addressing of something. And then it's like it squares the nodes, moves upward. And it's like, for whatever reason, things just get easier. It's kind of like that breakthrough moment. In my opinion, there is this kind of like things are moving onward and upward. And I think that's just really exciting, even though everything's still in Aquarius, right? It's kind of like, yeah, it's you're not out of the woods yet, but things are definitely feeling lighter. Things are definitely moving forward. And I think that's also told by this Moon Jupiter Neptune conjunction. The moon on top of Jupiter and Pisces. I mean, Jupiter is pretty much on Neptune right now. When things are good, they're really good. And this is a lot of this next couple weeks is going to be the best of times and it's going to be the worst of times because, Jupiter and Neptune is so, euphoric and overwhelming and so powerful, right? It's so there's this level of certainty and clarity, and there's also this level of, confusion if you look a little bit, too hard into the details. But I think as the moon conjoins Jupiter, there is this uplifting feeling. I think there is this kind of like things, again, I think there's a lot of momentum building up at this point, but the momentum isn't like, oh my God, we're ramping up. It's like things are feeling lighter, things are feeling better. Mars is conjoining Saturn. So it's not that we're out of the woods yet and we still have a very serious thing to face, but at least Venus, the part of us that it just wants to enjoy things, have fun, have pleasure and connect, she'll actually have a better chance of doing those things. And I think as the moon conjoins Jupiter, this is just like having a lot of hopeful, a lot of hope for what is next. And the other reason I say that too is this is all an aversion to each other, right? Like the moon, Jupiter, Neptune, Venus, Saturn, Mars, they can't even see each other. So I think regardless of what's going on in this Aquarius stuff, like, yeah, sure, there's a lot of hardcore stuff going on there, but at least you have Moon, Jupiter, Neptune, where there is this area where you get to be excited about, you get to be hopeful about, you get to really feel and express. And I just think as Venus leaves that conjunction with Saturn, moves on, hits the bending of the nodes, it'll be easier to even enjoy this, right? So that is Wednesday. And then we go into Thursday. Excuse me. And on Thursday, we're going to be having the moon ingress into Aries. And as it ingresses into Aries, of course, the new moon starts. The new moon technically won't be late until later in the day, like the evening, but the moon will conjoin Mercury before the actual new moon happens. So I've been thinking about this. This seems a little bit weird. So we go through Wednesday and, moon will conjoin Neptune and then it'll be void for a little bit. So things will be kind of like, all up in the air. But then by the time you wake up into Thursday morning, the moon ingresses into Aries and it will head towards a conjunction with Mercury, while Mercury is also like super duper combust right now. A lot of layers to this. One, the moon going into Aries is like, imagine the feeling of being a race car driver and hopping into your car, right, getting ready for the race. Like you've put on your gear, you've put on your helmet, and now you're about to go sit. And now you are sitting in the car waiting for everyone to turn on their engines and, the pacer car to start, opening up. That is what this is. Like Venus conjoining Saturn, there's a lot of nervousness of things going on. Like I think of this as like a buildup before a race. And as that moon goes into Aries, it's like, it's race time. And as the moon conjoins Mercury, this is kind of, I think about if you've ever done like sports or if you've ever done a performance, sometimes your mind sometimes you're almost like checked out, right? Like it's kind of like programmed, automatic programming. It's same thing when you drive to work every single day, and there's some days where you don't even remember like your commute because you were just kind of like in the zone. And with Mercury being combust in Aries, like Moon conjoining Mercury also combust. This is all hidden by the sun in Aries. There's this like kind of like getting in that moment, getting in that headspace of, and I think, and I love that. I like using this analogy right now of racing, because when a race starts, you go. Like I think of, especially with like motocross, when the gates drop, it's like you pin, you go, and that's it. And at the same time, this is, I mean, we're building up for the Mercury Cazimi, which is happening at the same time as like Mars conjoining Saturn. There's like this, all of a sudden it starts. Mars and Saturn are also going to be squaring the nodes too. Things really shift. But I think this Moon conjoining Mercury, while Mercury's combust, you might be too, I feel like, really up in your head to really kind of know what's going on, right? Like Mercury is, again, communication, rationalization, our thoughts, and it's in Aries. It's just thinking of one thing. It's very singularity focused, but it's combust. So it's really hard to concentrate on it. Maybe it's really hard to express it. And it's much more of like, Mercury in Aries just wants to be blunt. And as it's conjoining the sun, or at least as it's combust with the sun, which means it's kind of being burnt up, it's like not being able to really bluntly say the thing that you want to, or at least not being able to connect like your mind with your mouth. And I think as the Moon conjoins Mercury here, there is this, not all of the pieces are put together, but that's fine. Like, cause it's race time. You're getting in the zone. I think at this point is a good way to really look at it. And then by the time we get later into the evening and we have this new moon in Aries, it's like, I would say if there was a day where the gates drop, it's probably going to be the Mercury Cazimi and like the race starts. But this new moon in Aries, I think, is really getting settled with, what are we initiating? What are we beginning? We have to also look at the ruler of this new moon, which is Mars, and it's pretty much on top of Saturn, right? There's a lot of ways to look at this, and we're going to be talking about this Mars-Saturn conjunction for quite some time, because the last time Mars conjoined Saturn was the day the lockdowns happened. And this was, you heard words like social distancing, which is very Mars and Saturn in Aquarius, right? Like separate yourself from people. Mars separates, and Saturn in Aquarius is like groups of people, and like social distance. Mars, Saturn, separate yourself from other people. And, Mars and Saturn, you could look at this as like, fighting authorities or lockdown. That's the other way to look at it. Like Mars is, Mars hitting Saturn. It's like you will be put into lockdown. You will be facing an authority in a hostile way, almost. Is a good way to look at it. Your energy, what you were doing, your momentum will stop. Now, this is the third. This isn't the 0 degree Aquarius mark, which I think is really important. I don't know if you heard that. But I look at, as we're kind of getting into this new moon and Mars is about to hit Saturn, there's clearly the last time Mars conjoined Saturn in Aquarius, and I'm going to make a podcast episode about kind of what we've been through in the past 2 years in terms of astrology and what that means in the future, kind of reflecting on the last Mars-Saturn conjunction. But the last time we had a Mars-Saturn conjunction, it was like they were building up in Capricorn, but then Saturn moved into Aquarius, and then Mars moved into Aquarius, and they hit each other, and then it was like, Mars was just kind of chilling after that. Versus this has been Mars going into Aquarius and building up and building up and building up and building up and then hitting Saturn. So I don't necessarily think that this is like, the lockdowns were so out of the blue. We were like, wait, what? Like, versus this is expected. We've seen this coming. And this one's squaring the nodes. I think, we'll talk about more of what I think is going to happen on the world stage next week when it actually happens. But I look at this new moon with Mars about to hit Saturn as, what are you really preparing for? Because this isn't just like a new moon in Aries of like, oh, it's spring, we're initiating, we're starting. Like, it's Mars conjoining Saturn ruling this. This isn't very cutthroat, very raw, real, serious shit right now. And I really look at this as like, if you're going to be, well, for one, it's like, what are you fighting for? If you're going to be racing, like, sure, I think there's a part of competition that is for fun, but I don't think there's a lot of things that are going on right now that are just for fun. A lot of this looks very real. And so, Jupiter and Neptune, there is an ideal you're trying to reach. There is a vision, but I think in order to get there, there is a confrontation and an actual, like, you just got to get real. I think it's the same thing with like, if you're going to be in a sport, if you're going to play a sport and you're in a really big game, Like, you have to get your head in the game. You cannot be checked out. You cannot be, oh, I'm just playing for fun. No, you're playing for competition. You're playing for realsies. And I think that's what a lot of this new moon is kind of like, hey, I mean, this is also the start of the year too, April 1st. I just gotta say, I hate the fact that we're like, you're already seeing like lockdowns in China start. And then, like, of course, the stuff in Russia and Ukraine. I hate that this is all going on around April 1st because I'm not ready for the April Fool's Day jokes coming up. They're gonna be so bad. But anyway, maybe I am kind of looking forward to it because it'll be a day where we all agree that they're not funny. But the April Fool's Day jokes are gonna be really crazy. Anyway, we get into Saturday. Saturday kind of has a lot going on too. Moon is going to be making a sextile to Venus, and it'll square Pluto. The moon will then ingress into Taurus during the Mercury Cazimi on Saturday. Saturday is a moment of clarity, that's for sure. Oh, I didn't even talk about Friday. My bad. I was like, wait, what? Like Saturday. Let's actually talk about Friday. My bad. I'm so bad. I'm so all over the place. Friday, really the only thing that's going on Friday is the moon's going to be sextiling Mars and Saturn. So what's nice about Friday is we have this new moon, right? And we've laid the groundwork where we are in initiatory, we're in spark phase, we are in rev up your engines mode, and the moon is then going to apply to the sextile with Mars and Saturn right as it leaves this the sun. Very motivating, very like action oriented is probably a good word. Fight oriented is a good word. Moon in Aries is very confrontational. It's going to be sextiling Mars in Aquarius. I think there's a lot of, again, I don't think this is necessarily Gates drop energy, but maybe everyone's clearing the line. Everyone's starting their bikes up. We're all building up for it. We're all ramping up for it. And I think, what I do like about this is immediately after the new moon sextiles its ruler, Mars. And there's this like, once you set your intentions, once you do your thing, it's like immediately moving on to taking action with it. So, just Thursday seems like it's like Thursday night. We have the, new moon, set your intentions, do whatever. We wake up Friday morning, April 1st, and it's go time. It's time to, get everything ready, get everything going. And that's kind of the only thing that's kind of going on Friday. It's like everything that you already kind of planned, like it's still really new moon in Aries energy, but this time it's like taking a lot of action on it. But that really leads us to Saturday on April 2nd. And that's going to be, of course, the moon making a sextile to Venus, making a square to Pluto. Then it's going to enter Taurus, where then we'll also have the Mercury Cazimi. So Saturday, one thing here is the moon making the sextile to Venus, I think will be really nice because the Venus really like the moon will conjoin Venus as it hits Saturn, right? Which like, at least we have like the moon there. Then Venus doesn't really get any aspects for a while. And so I really kind of like this moon in Aries sextiling Venus in Aquarius as it's kind of reinforcing, or it's, what's the word I'm looking for? It's, I would say reinforcing in the sense of confidence, spark, initiatory. Like this moon and this Aries energy is really going to lighten up this Aquarius stuff for sure. Cause we've been in a cold Aquarian, dystopia is a great word to use for quite some time. And it's going to continue for a long time. But I think lately, we've had sun go into Aries, Mercury in Aries, but as this moon sextiles Venus, things are really warming up at this point. We're getting out of the cold. But the moon is also going to square Pluto, which is this kind of like, this is the moon fresh out of a new moon, and then it sextiles Venus and squares Pluto, where I feel like the square to Pluto is addressing a lot of fears. It's like, okay, if you're going to do it, for example, when I was quitting cigarette or when I was quitting nicotine, it's like, okay, sure, you might be good the first day, but what are you going to do on like the second day or the third day? Or like when you have those moments, how are you going to address that? And it's something that's like, new moon in Aries, you're starting something new, and then immediately you're addressing the bigger issue. And I think this is a lot of like fear stuff. I mean, yeah, Pluto, of course, governments, corporations, corruption, all the underworld stuff, the icky stuff. And I think this moon in Aries squaring Pluto is very like, nothing about this right now seems casual. That's what I could say. Like even this Jupiter Neptune, there's nothing casual about Jupiter Neptune. That's for sure. Like the visionary stuff, the tranquility, the spirituality stuff, like none of that is even casual. That's all very serious too. And I just look at this moon in Aries squaring Pluto and Capricorn is like really turning up the notch on, moon and Aries stuff, our emotions being very, confrontational, charged up, aggressive, and squaring Pluto and Capricorn is like, confrontation, breakthrough, energy. You might be kind of dealing with some fear, but this is a great opportunity to like kind of get over it, bust through some fear if you can. And then the moon will ingress into Taurus as pretty much we're having this Mercury Cazimi. And Mercury's on the, there's a difference between a retrograde Cazimi when Mercury is in between the sun and the earth. And there's a difference between Mercury's on the far side of the sun. And with this being in Aries, I think this isn't necessarily like a Mercury retrograde. An interior Cazimi is kind of like oh, this is what I didn't see. Oh, this is what I didn't understand. Versus, I think of like very crown chakra. Here's me getting super woo. I think of like crown chakra, the idea of like, or what's the fucking chakra that's above your head? Well, like, I think of this as much more of connecting to a higher source and not necessarily super like, what is it, left brain, where like things are very like cognitive. But this is gates drop. This is go time. This is that moment of clarity. This is that moment of spark. And I think a lot about when it comes to fire. What are the 4 components of fire? It's like you need oxygen, fuel, spark. I can't remember the other one. Let me know what the other one is in the comments. But the moon ingresses into Taurus, where this is the moon's exalted sign, right? The moon rules, are what's necessary, our emotions, our bodies, what we feel. And as it goes into Taurus, there's a sense of absorbing what we need, gaining, being, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I think of nutrition when I think of moon and Taurus. Like what nutrients do you need? What is going to satiate you and make you feel secure, stable, comfortable, filled? And I think as the moon's opening up from this new moon going into Taurus, there's this sense of obtaining, or this sense of like, I don't want to say manifesting, but like things, receiving is the word I want to look for. The moon is receiving a lot in Taurus at this time. And I believe as Mercury's, Cazimi, pretty much conjoining the heart of the sun, where there is this refreshment of Mercury's topics, right? There's this clarity. There's this, new beginning. And in the traditional astrology stuff, they, I forgot who says this. I've said this before though. A planet that is combust, which means it's like being really close to the sun, is representative of a sick or a dying planet. But a planet conjoining the sun exactly is like when that sick or dying person could die, or there's this sense of bottom of like, let's say you're ill. That Mercury Cazimi point is like the moment of which you are not ill anymore, but then Mercury will still be combust afterwards. And, once you're not done being ill, there's still a sense of recovery. But this is that pivot point, I think. And it's different from an interior retrograde Cazimi, right? An interior retrograde Cazimi is like, again, maybe realizing your missteps, realizing what you need to go back over, kind of getting an idea of what has changed, versus this is much more of what is starting. What are you moving forward into? Because Mercury is now going to become an evening star. It is now on the farthest side of the sun, reaching out, and before it comes back in. So a lot of this is like, this is where I'm going. This is what I'm getting. This is what I'm pursuing. It's very spark. It's very, and when you think about lately, I've been trying to maximize like my schedule and like what works best for me and at certain times. And this is why I play a lot with planetary hours. Speaking of which, I just recorded a vlog about, so I've been working on possibly doing a vlog, and I have my first episode. It's released early on my Patreon. All my patrons love it. Let me know if you guys are interested in a vlog series. I did my first one I did about planetary hours. Anyway, let me know if you guys would want something like that. Because I'm debating on putting it out on YouTube. But anyway, when it comes to like Max, like again, like the schedule stuff, oftentimes I find the best time to write, or the best time for me to really get like my mental brain work done, is first thing in the morning. Like I just wake up and it's just there, and I just have to channel that shit. And when it's there, it's there. Like when it's there, you can't deny it. When it's there, you can't ignore it. When the spark's there, you kind of have to go, right? When the fire starts, when the gates drop, you don't just, like, let's say you're, again, racing moment, gates drop, you kind of have to just pin it and go and think about the rest later, almost, in a sense. And I really look at this Mercury Cazimi as building up, maybe in those moments building up to it, you're not necessarily fully mentally connected, but then all of a sudden the gates drop and you're in the zone. You are on your way. And this is Saturday, right? Mars is conjoining Saturn. I think this is also too, I think one of the more unfortunate parts of this is a Mercury Cazimi ruled by Mars, and Mars is heading towards Saturn. There is this sense of like, hey, like, you're about to address this. There is about to be a serious coming together, a serious separation, or a serious commitment, or a serious I would say even a adjustment or a block, right? Like Mars is what you're fighting for. Mars is what, your desires or what your actions are intended towards. And it's about to hit Saturn. You're either about to go on lockdown, or you're about to be social distanced, or you're about to be, pretty much super committed to something. Look at what Aquarius rules in. What house does Aquarius rule in your chart? Because that's where you're going to be locked down. There's going to be a serious part of your life that is addressed, and that Mars Saturn is it. And I think this Mercury Cazimi is, I think, actually realizing that that's about to happen. But the Mercury Cazimi in Aries is kind of not necessarily, it's not necessarily afraid. I don't necessarily think a lot of this is like, oh my God, we're about to go into this. It's very like, no, we're going to fucking do this. And Mars, Mars has been building up to this conjunction with Saturn for a long time. This isn't out of the blue, We'll talk more about that next week. But then we get into Sunday, the moon will conjoin Uranus, and then it will square Mars. That's pretty much it. Let's go to it. Moon will go through Taurus. Sounds great. And then we get into Sunday morning, and the moon will pretty much conjoin Uranus. And the way to hack the moon Uranus stuff, or the Uranus and Taurus stuff, is being inventive. Like Uranus is inventiveness, uniqueness, innovation, liberation. And Taurus is like literally like foods, nutrients, like wealth, sustainability, agriculture, all of that stuff. Moon conjoining, but also Uranus is like destabilizing, random events. And I think if you're trying to hold on to like a lot of old paradigm stuff, you are going to realize that it's a slippery slope, versus the moon Uranus is like a great time to literally try something new. I can't emphasize that enough. This is a great time to, like, if Saturn, it's with Saturn and Uranus, right, in these fixed signs, things don't bend, they break. So it's like, rather than trying to like slowly like, maneuver your way into something, like just fucking jump into the deep end of the pool, just jump. So really the only way out of it. And I think as the moon conjoins Uranus and Taurus, feeling like you're almost even forced to jump into the cold end of the pool, or the deep end of the pool, and just jump right in. And then the moon will square Mars as we go into the night. Like maybe that's not necessarily the funnest way to do things. The moon in Taurus doesn't like really being uncomfortable. The moon in Taurus doesn't really like jolting, but the moon's going to be forced to. And I think the way out of it is just kind of doing it yourself, right? I think of like the Wim Hof method of like, I fucking hate cold showers so much. I'm personally trying to work on that. But, if you were to just say, oh, just jump in cold water, people would be like, no. Versus the Wim Hof method, it's like, oh, we're jumping in cold water for the like health benefits and for our bodies. And so that's very moon and Taurus conjoining Uranus of like, no, it's not just, oh yeah, sure, it's uncomfortable, but it's for comfort, for the sake of feeling better, right? And it's inventive, it's weird, it's unique. It's also very like, I don't know, it's kind of radical in my opinion, jumping into cold water, at least in the 21st century. But anyway, then the moon's going to square Mars though, as we go into the night, Sunday night. And This is also building up towards the Mars-Saturn conjunction, because the Mars-Saturn conjunction literally happens like, oh, the sun's going to be coming out. And it's going to be like hitting my face. So don't mind the brightness that's going to be hitting here in a second. The moon will also, this is going into Monday. The Mars-Saturn conjunction pretty much happens on Monday. Yeah, pretty much Monday. So we're building up into this on Sunday night as the moon squares Mars. And I think this is kind of like that. Again, I just don't think it's moon in Taurus squaring Mars in Aquarius. I don't know. You're going to have to get comfortable with Mars in Aquarius. Well, it's like with the lockdown stuff. Like when the lockdown happened, it's like, okay, we didn't have all of our creature comforts that we're used to. So we had to figure out how to do things differently. Like moon in Taurus is we're looking for our creature comforts, but Mars in Aquarius and Saturn in Aquarius is like, well, there's some type of addressing here that you're not going to have access to that. So figure out what you're going to do anyway. That's what a lot of this looks like. And then, that brings us into next week. Mars conjoins Saturn first thing on Monday morning. It's fucking either lockdowns again. They're already doing them in China, or I don't even know what it's going to be. I'm going to try to get my face out of the sunlight here so it's not all messed up color. Venus goes into Pisces. Thank fucking God. Mars and Saturn being in the same sign, in aversion to the Venus and Jupiter, is going to be like, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. But I really think Venus has been in an Earth sign, and not even just Earth. Venus has been in Saturn ruled signs and pretty much with Mars and Saturn for so long that like when Venus enters her exalted sign, it's like, you're not even going to, it's going to be so good. Like you guys, I'm telling you, when Venus goes into Pisces, it's going to be like, if you're used to shit, if you're used to eating, imagine all your life you ate shit and that's all you've ever known was the taste of shit in your mouth. And then you finally have like stale bread. That stale bread will taste 10,000 times better than any shit that you had. And I feel like Venus going into Pisces is like, it's not even stale bread. Like you're going to have a sweet piece of cake after eating shit for like months and months and months. And it's going to be like, your brain's about to be jacked up on sugar. It's going to be very rewarding. And then Mercury is going to be sextiling Mars and Saturn. I think that was really the only thing that was going on next week. And so I guess my final thoughts about this week is, there's just a lot of space to really decompress this week. There's a lot of space to really grab a hold of what is shifting in your life, what is pivoting in your life. And I think a lot of this moment is about, you have to take, there's a time when you can't, there's a certain time to do things, right? I'm trying to think of, for example, when it comes to like cooking, there's a certain time you have to flip the steak. There's a certain time you have to do the thing. And in those moments of doing the thing that requires you to just do it, you can't overthink it and you have to just do it. Think about it later. Take action now. Think about it later. And I think that's what a lot of this week is getting that mental clarity, making the shifts that have to happen. And then we go into next week. And again, like I said, what's so important about this week is April. By the time we're done with April, we're in a completely different world. And by the time we're done with May, we're in a completely different fucking universe. By the time we go into June will be kind of a very chill month, to be honest with you guys. I'm really looking forward to the chillness of June because there's so much of April and May. But it's very exciting. I just think this isn't like oh my God, like things are just easily coming our way. But it's like, things can happen if you make it happen. And I think that's what a lot of this week's about. So I'm going to leave you guys off with that. Thank you so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. And I'll be seeing you next week.